up, you guys? The Curious Owl here, and today I have the announcement for the next round of Battle of the Bookish. So for those of you that are not aware, I host a readathon twice a year that is month-long, and we also do a 1-week round every 3 months in between the big rounds. We do our big rounds in January and in June, with our next one coming up here in June. It's going through the entire month of June, and usually we do a week-long readathon in about March, April-ish, or then also between the June and January ones in about the October and November time. So each round we do has a different theme that is picked by the winners of the last round, which this month's round is going to be based on essentially catching mythical creatures, if you will. Essentially, we have 4 different teams of people that basically will be different types of creature getters, essentially, however you want to call them that. But basically each team has a set of prompts that they have for their team specifically, and they also have a general list of prompts that everyone gets to be able to use. So I'm going to go through the rules for people that are new to this readathon, maybe getting into it for the first time, and if that is the case, welcome. I'm so glad that you would like to be a part of this readathon. The Discord is linked in the description for you guys to go check out, and it will also have all of the information I will be talking about here on there the day this video goes out. We are usually pretty good about getting that all set up the same day that this video, the announcement video, goes out. So first and foremost, you pick your team. There are 4 different teams. We have our fighters, which are the people that basically would go to the front line when it comes down to basically going to catch creatures. They would much rather use their fists than be smart and try to trap something. They basically will be the ones in those D&D campaigns that'll just be like, you know what, I'm just gonna initiate and we're gonna just go. We're just gonna fight right now. So if you are very much one of those kinds of people, the go-getters, the people who kind of just throw the first punch, if you will, that is the team for you. Then we have our campers, who are basically the complete antithesis of that. The campers are the ones who essentially will set up camp. They're the ones that are super lax, super chill, and they just kind of set a trap and wait for something to kind of come in. They don't care what they catch. They just want to catch something, and they'll just take whatever there is and just kind of lounge and just enjoy being in nature. So if you are a little bit more of a lackadaisical, very kind of chill individual, that's the team for you. Then we have our flyers, who are our aerial team. They are the ones that take to the skies and typically will catch the ones that are the ones in the sky. So things like griffins or high-flying birds, anything like that. So they are the ones that will also, though, be good when tracking the larger animals, because they'll get that nice aerial view of the creatures so that they can see them traversing through the forest and all of that. So this is kind of the team that likes to be in multiple places at once, and they like to do a lot of different things all at one time while maintaining their kind of sanity at the same time. So if that's kind of something that you would be interested in, go check out that team. And finally, we have our last team, which is our trackers. Now, our trackers are the people who are really keen on detail. They are the ones that are literally finding the footprints and the trails that these creatures leave and tracking them down literally from that. So if you are a very attention to detail person, this is definitely a team for you, because you will be more than likely able to help your team with finding those creatures a lot faster than maybe some of the other teams, because you are hot on their tails all the time. Now, like I said, each team is going to have their own specific prompts, which we will get into a little bit later, but we also have general prompts that everyone gets to be able to use, which again, we will get into here in just a minute. But really the biggest thing is that you just have to try to read as much as you can in the month time span. This readathon will be going from Saturday, June 1st all the way to June 30th. And so you have that entire month to read as much as you possibly can. We will allow some books that carried over from May, if you have any, but they have to have been mostly read in the month of May. We're talking 75% of the book has to have been read in May for it to count for anything in terms of prompt points or even what are considered page points, because each book you read, depending on the amount of pages it is going to account for some additional points on top of your prompt points if you decide to use a prompt with it or not. No matter what, if you don't use a prompt with a book, you still will get page points for the credit of reading the book in the month. But like I said, there are some caveats to that. If you started the book in May, it has to have been read 75% of the way through or more for it to count in June. Now, if you find at the end of the month you are really, really close to finishing your book, and you just don't think you're gonna get done with it completely by June 30th, then if you have read 75% of the book, by the time the readathon ends, if you've read 75% or more, you will earn your full amount of points for it based on what you would like for it to count for. In addition to that, we do allow DNFs in the readathon. However, they are worth a very small amount of points because of the fact that we are encouraging you to try to finish your books as much as you can. So they're only going to be worth a small amount of points for DNFs, and you have to prove that you have read at least 25% of the book before you decide to DNF it. Now, obviously that's going to differ depending on what type of book you're reading, whether it's like a manga or graphic novel, or if it's a fully fledged fantasy novel, for instance. So depending on what book you're reading, you have to just have read about 25% of it, and let us know when you submit it for DNF points how far you got into the book, and if it equals 25% or more, we will count it for the points that it is being used for. I hope that all makes sense. If there's anything that seems to be unclear, please feel free to ask us in our Discord or leave a comment down below, because I'd be more than happy to help with anything that seems confusing. We've been doing this for a while, but I know that there's always still some new people that come and find our readathon, and so I want to be as helpful as I possibly can with answering any questions. But with that, let's get into the page point system. So, like I said, depending on the length of the book that you read in the month of June, it is going to be worth so many points. With our DNFs being only worth 5 points if you reach that 25% mark that we ask for with DNFs. And then from there, essentially, depending on what range it falls under, your book will count for so many points. Now, again, you don't have to include a prompt with this book that you decide to read. It can be just read for page points, and that is totally okay. The page points are kind of just an added bonus on top of your prompts if you use them, because the prompts are going to be worth 50 to 100 points by themselves. Now, if you end up reading a book in the month that is over 1,000 pages, you're going to earn even more points. That's going to be worth at least 200 points right there. So for those big book readers, that's your opportunity. Go for it. Have fun. Now, without further ado, let's get into the prompts. So our general prompts, or the prompts that everybody gets to use no matter what team you are on, they are the same every single round. They are our standard ones because it seems to be that they are the most common types of prompts we will see in most readathons that there are across BookTube, BookTok, things like that. So we have 5 main general prompts that everybody gets to use no matter what team you are on, and each of them are worth 50 points. Now, the prompts are as follows. You, first of all, just have to read a book. It doesn't matter what kind of book it is, as long as you read a book, you will get 50 points if you assign that book with this prompt. And keep in mind, again, you can also then add page points to your book with this prompt. So no matter what book you read, it will count for both page points and this prompt if you put it for that prompt. Next is to read an LGBTQ+ book, because we want to encourage you to read all kinds of different books, things that are maybe outside of your perspective, outside of your background, anything like that. But in particular, because June is Pride Month, we do encourage heavily to read LGBTQ work. This basically involves anything under the LGBTQ spectrum, whether it's female-female romances, male-male romances, bisexual or pansexual representation, transgender or non-binary representation, queerness representation in general, whether it's questioning or just unidentifiable kinds of queerness, essentially. So please, by any means, try to read something that is within that spectrum if you are able to, and if you are comfortable with doing so. Next is to read a TBR veteran. For those of you that don't know what a TBR veteran is, it basically is a book that has been on your TBR for at least a year. It has to have been in your possession and or something you've been wanting to read for at least a year, has been published at least a year ago, something like that. Then the next one is to read a book with pictures. Now, this is really awesome for a lot of people who love to read graphic novels and manga. This can also be picture books for kids. It really just has to have some kind of pictures. And if there are pictures like maps for our fantasy works, that would kind of work too, because it is a picture within the book. So my fantasy folks, There you go. And the last general prompt is to reread a favorite. We are always encouraging rereading favorites here at Battle of the Bookish because we love the comfort reads. We love the books that get us into reading and get us excited to read again, especially if we've been in a bit of a slump. And a lot of times this readathon comes along for people when they've been in a slump for a month or two, and so encouraging them to reread a favorite book is usually a really good way to kickstart people back into reading and getting them involved in the readathon. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the team prompts. Now, the team prompts, for those of you that are new, are worth more points with then also the page points that can be added to them. The general prompts that everybody gets to use are only worth 50 points apiece, but the team prompts are worth 100 points apiece. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that you have to read all of your team's prompts before you are able to jump to another team and start using their prompts. So if you are on the trackers team, you need to read all of the trackers prompts before you are able to then say go to the flyers team and start reading off of their prompts. And when you do so, no matter what prompts you are reading, as long as they're the team ones, you'll earn 100 points on top of whatever page points you get for the book that you are reading that fits that prompt. So without further ado, let's get into the first team, which is the trackers. Now, each of these prompts is basically dedicated to understanding like what the kind of team is and essentially finding prompts that kind of fit those ideas. So first we have Keen Detail, which is to read a book that has some kind of hidden image on the cover. Sometimes with our covers, especially the really intricate ones, there might be hidden little pictures here and there. So especially those really cool, like maybe Regency romances or like the really floral kinds of like patterned covers, there might be little hidden images somewhere in there. See if you can find a book that has that. Then we have Footprints, which is to read a book that involves some kind of travel, whether it is traveling to a new country, traveling to a new city, you know, something along those lines, whether it's air travel, by foot, by car, teleportation. It does not matter. It just has to involve some kind of travel. Next we have On the Trail. For this you have to read a book that either involves a mystery or a search for something. So this can then extend to maybe even a fantasy. There has to be some kind of finding of something, some kind of mysteriousness that there is within the book. Next is Find the Hideout. So finding the hideout of the creatures, for instance. This is to read a book that has a building on the cover. It can be a skyscraper, it can be a house, it can be a castle, just has to be some kind of building. Then the last prompt is Get the Big Monster or Go Home, because my trackers, I know, are going to be wanting to find the ones that have the big footprints and kind of working with the fighters in some capacity, and so I think that they would definitely go for the big creatures. But this is to read a chunky book. Now, a chunky book is how you determine it. For most people, it is a book that is over 500 pages, especially those that are fantasy readers. Now, a chunky book, though, if you are one that tends to read more shorter works, might be a book that's over 400 pages. It really just depends on what you deem as a chunky book. Next, we have our flyers team, which are our aerial team. They are the ones that are looking up in the sky and going up in the sky and seeing that they can get a bird's eye view of things. So for this, the first prompt we have is called Eyes on the Sky. And this is to read a book that either has blue, white, or yellow on the cover. And it can have a mix of the three if you find that, or you know, if you have two of the three colors, that's fine. It just has to have one or several of those colors in the cover, whether that's the text on the cover or the actual image on the cover itself. Next we have Feathers, as typically the flyers will probably be going for the more aerial based creatures like griffins, dragons, things like that. This is to read a book that has a bird on the cover. Pretty simple. A lot of books have birds on the cover, and I would also count if it has a feather on there, that works as well. Next is Take Flight. This is to read something really quick. So this, to me, again, is probably something less than 400 pages. Again, it also depends on how you view a quick read, whether that's, you know, a manga, graphic novel, a novella, a short story. It just has to be basically smaller than what the standard book usually is, which is around 400 pages. Next, we have Aerial View, which is to read a book that involves being in a high place. Now, that can be a very tall building, that can be in the mountains. Just if there's a point in your book where you're in a really high place, like if you're in an airplane at some point in time in your book, that'll count. Next and final prompt for flyers is Bird Call. This is to read a book that has some kind of multimedia pages within the book. So it can be text messages, emails, it can be, you know, social media posts, transcripts, anything like that. There's a lot of books anymore that do this multimedia kind of aspect to it, and it's really fun. I think it's very much a really cool thing, especially for young adult books. So definitely have some fun with this one. I think it's going to be a really interesting thing to see what kinds of books you guys come up with that have that multimedia aspect. Next, we have our campers team, which are our people that are very nice and chill and relaxed, and the prompts are as follows. First, you have Camp Out, which is to read a book that involves camping of some kind. We are going to extend this to also having characters stay at a hotel or motel of some kind to give it a little bit more wiggle room, but basically they have to be staying somewhere that is not their normal home because they're on a trip or they're basically stranded somewhere, you know, whatever the case may be. There has to be some kind of camping involved. Next is On the Ground, as our campers are going to be basically staying on the ground. They're not moving anywhere. They're pretty much going to be staying in place. For this, you have to read a book that keeps a character in a spot for a very long time. Now, that can mean that they stay in the same city, the same building, they could stay in the same country for a long time, or they could literally be frozen in place for a long time. Whatever floats your boat, however you want to make that work, have fun with it. Next is Relax and Wait. Wait for the creatures to come to you. This is to read a book that has a character that is either laying down or sitting down on the cover. So a lot of our murder mysteries might have a character where you see their feet and they're laying down. That totally works for that. But they have to either be sitting or laying down. They can't be standing. Next is Set the Trap. Let's get the trap set and go sit and relax and wait for something to come into it. And this is to read a book that has a very enticing cover, something that kind of gets you feeling like it would be the lure for the creatures, essentially. And finally, for our campers, we have Sleep Until Something Comes. For this, you're just gonna read a comfort read. Now, this can extend to also involving your reread if that's a comfort read, because you are able to double up on prompts, and we'll get into a little bit more detail about that in particular in a minute, but that could be a great way to double up on prompts by rereading a book that's a comfort read. Super simple. And finally, our last team is our fighters, the people that are gonna be throwing fists and throwing daggers and hefting swords everywhere. These are our people that are the go-getters. So the first prompt is Ready the Weapons. This is to read a book that has a weapon on the cover. Super simple, really easy, especially if you're a fantasy lover like myself. Next is Make a Plan of Attack. Now, this one you have to read a book that either involves battles or war. It doesn't have to be over the entire story, but they have to be somehow involved in the stories themselves. Next is Strike First. Now, this one's a little bit of a different one. This is to read a book that either has some kind of like flash on the cover, like a flash from like light essentially, or it has to have a scratch on the cover. Like some of our thrillers and horrors might have like claw marks on the cover or something like that. Or if you accidentally scratched your book at one point in time and it's got like little scratch marks on it, or if you're like me, my dogs have gotten into my books a time or two and there's like little teeth marks or something in there and there's little scratches where they've hit, that counts. This is a little bit of a different prompt. We really wanted to try to extend our little fingers into different ideas when it came to these prompts. So if you have any questions on what might count for that, by all means, let us know in the Discord. Let me know in the comments. Be more than happy to validate whether or not your book would count for that. Next is Strength Over Brains. Now, this is to read a book that has kind of a meathead character, the guy that really just uses their strength to their advantage, but they're not necessarily all brains, if you know what I mean. Next and final prompt for our fighters team is Give It Your All. This is to read an intimidating read, something that scares you maybe, or something that you're kind of like, oh, I've been meaning to get to this for a while, but it's been kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like it, so therefore it's intimidating. Or it could be a book that's really big for you, and so that makes it intimidating, or it could be the content that's involved in it that's intimidating. It just has to be something that kind of gives you a little bit of hesitation in reading it. And this would also work for something that's a TBR veteran. There's a very easy way for you to get a TBR veteran and use the intimidating read prompt and work them together to double up with this one. So with all of the prompts now gone over, we're gonna get into a little bit of the minutia in terms of working with the prompts. So you are able to double up, as I've explained. However, the prompts can only be used one time. So if you double up with 2 prompts, that's fine, but both of those prompts are then out. You are not able to use them for the rest of the readathon. So if you decide, if you're on the campers team, to read a book with your camp out prompt, those two, the read a book prompt and the camp out prompt, are both done. You are not able to use them for the rest of the readathon. And as I stated earlier, when you are on a team, you have to read all of your team's prompts first before you can jump to another team and start using their prompts. And you can only go to one team at a time. So you can't jump from campers to flyers and do one prompt from flyers, then one prompt from fighters, then one prompt from the trackers. You have to pick one team to read prompts from when you jump from your team. Now, how do we determine the winner of the rounds? So the winner is determined by an averaging of points for each team. So depending on how many people are in each team, there will be essentially a point value given to each team member, and then that is averaged out. The total amount that the team gets from all of the players, that then gets averaged out by how many players there are on the team. So depending on how large your team is, that could make or break you. It could be that you get 2 people on one team and they end up winning. Or it could be that you get 15 people on one team and they end up winning because they end up having a higher average because they got a lot of points. And even though they have a lot of people, their average was still really, really good. So it can really go either way. We have seen both examples happen within Battle of the Bookish, so it's really anybody's game. And we have had also a lot of close calls between teams where we've had some teams have very small deviations in points between teams, and it was a very close game for a lot of our teams. But the winner of the Battle of the Bookish round is going to then be able to not only have the bragging rights for the next several months until the next big round, but they then get to choose the theme that is going to be used in the next large round, and then therefore essentially what we will be doing for the training camp, which is our week-long readathons that we do about 3 months in between each of our large rounds. So there's a lot at stake with this one. It's a lot of good times, a lot of real great fun, and I am always so excited when it comes around to this time of year. It's such a great thing that me and my friends get to do. I can't ever wait, really, truthfully. I get so excited that I just build my TBR almost immediately because I just can't help myself. I'm gonna restrain myself best I can with that because I have some very special plans going on with June in particular's TBR. So I'll have to tell you guys about that when it comes to it. If you guys do have any questions, again, the Discord is down below. Please feel free to ask us anything in there, the Battle Masters. And also feel free to leave comments here on this video if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to answer anything that is a little confusing or anything like that, because there's a lot of information that gets thrown at you in these announcement videos, and I want to be as helpful as I possibly can for those especially that are new. But anyway, that's it for me. So thank you guys so much for joining me in this video. If you guys did enjoy it, please do give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't already and you'd like to be, I would like to see more content like this, go ahead and hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock, and I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys!